Hey Summoners, welcome back to another Wild Rift video. My name is Nathan Ng, and today we'll be going over 10 tips for carrying bad players and teammates on Wild Rift. If you're popping off every single game, but you're still struggling to secure the wins, you come to the right place. Let's get right into it. The number one tip that we have for you when trying to carry bad players is to not compensate for their bad plays. When in Wild Rift, there's not much you can do to stop other lanes from feeding or to stop your jungler from pathing badly. But what you can do is get equally strong yourself by playing disciplined and never following your tilting teammates into certain death. You want to adopt a low variance playstyle, being able to be a reliable carry who can put out high emphasis on gold and experience so that when the time comes up for you to go against those fed opponents, you are strong enough due to your high farm. If you can't execute well when it counts, you'd be surprised at how many fights you can win by only grouping when you only know it's a good fight. A skill many players lack is the ability to say no to a fight. If you are behind and one of your team is already dead, there is usually no point in fighting for that dragon. If you are sitting on 2,000 gold and your jungler comes to your lane for a gank, ping them away instead of following up and risking the counter gank. It's incredibly important to stay level-headed and play the game on your terms. You still want to be proactive and take opportunities when they come to you, but at the same time, be very wary of following up your teammates on ill-advised plays. Tip number 2 for carrying bad teammates is to avoid tilts. Especially in lower elo, tilting is one of the biggest reasons that many people don't climb. Whether it's getting angry at your jungler for not helping you enough, at the enemy jungler for camping your lane, or your team for feeding, this distracting tilting behavior will only make you play worse and lower your chance of winning. The large majority of Wild Rift games are winnable if you play well, and it's important to stay focused on your own performance and not let your team's poor performance distract you from playing your best. Make sure to only be playing Wild Rift when you're in a good mood. There's no point in queuing up if you feel mentally weak and you're not in a fit state to perform. What personally helps me out is boba. I love boba. When you're in the game, you want to be a consistent player who has great habits and is unshaken by what is happening around them. Staying poised and keeping intensity high will make sure that you win those games when your teammates are underperforming. Tip number 3 is making use of the ping system. Using pings, especially in the early game, will minimize the amount of deaths that your teammates will be giving up on the laning phase. If your jungler is doing a poor job at tracking the enemy jungler, or your mid laner isn't pinging missing when his laner starts to roam, do it for them. Something that you have to be comfortable with if you want to consistently win games is doing more than what you might consider your job. Your only job when you enter a game of Wild Rift is to win the game, or I guess have fun. And if your teammates are underperforming and not stepping up to the plate, you have to take the game into your own hands. Don't be afraid of pinging too much. You want to act like the conductor of the game, constantly giving your team information and direction on where and where not to be. You would be surprised on how many ganks can be avoided and how many of your own plays will start to be capitalized on if you use the ping system more frequently. Make sure to make use of the new ping reply function that was added in 2.0 as well. Before we get on to tip number 4, this leads us to our question of the day. What is your favorite champion for solo carrying games? For me, a good Ezreal player is always a wonder to watch as he stays out of danger while carrying each fight. Make sure to leave your answer in the comments down below. Tip number 4 is not to overforce plays. When playing against fed champions or with unreliable teammates, it's incredibly important to be able to bide your time and not get flustered. Usually what happens is when your team is doing poorly, you feel like you need to go above and beyond, outplay your opponents and 1v9 the game, but that's not always the case. In fact, doing the opposite is a much more reliable way to win the game. Kinda sounds counterintuitive, but let me explain. In the majority of Wild Rift games that you play, you won't be able to quote-unquote hard carry. Sad, I know. This is something that you need to recognize and understand before you even head into the game. It is much more important to minimize mistakes than it is to constantly look for outplays and stylish highlights. The way to rally a team and carry bad teammates is by being the rock, never overextending, and being the foundation and being the source of pressure while you get strong off farm. Then, when it comes time to the fight, you are incredibly strong and ready to do your job. It's also incredibly important to not rely on your teammates. By taking fights that you know you're gonna win and not relying on your bad teammates to play perfectly mechanically, you minimize the chance that they have to make further mistakes. The worst thing you can do when you're the player your team has to rely on is overplay your hand and die trying to 1v5. You give over your shutdown bounty, which makes the game even harder to win, and every death when you're the catalyst is extremely punishing. When you are the strong member, the game is progressed through you, so it's important to be risk adverse. If you can constantly make good decisions that don't throw the game, you'll be at a substantial advantage, since throws are extremely common on Wild Rift. Tip number 5 is to play off of the opponent's mistakes. Across all levels of play, people make mistakes, cause we're human. What happens is when players start to notice that they're winning a game and they're gonna be starting to get fed, they will often get complacent and make more mistakes than usual. You need to both not let this happen to yourself, whilst also being ready to capitalize when your opponent messes up. Maybe they overextend in a side lane, maybe they recall in greedy spots, maybe they overstay on the map with lots of gold. Whatever it is, you want to be ready to strike as soon as you're given the opportunity, because when you're behind or have bad teammates, you won't have many. The great part of playing this way is the snowball effect.
If you capitalize on the enemy mistake and kill them, it is more likely that them and their teammates are going to be tilted. They will be frustrated and start getting nervous that the game that they thought was in the bag now is anyone's to win. Remember, you aren't playing against robots. Your opponents will make mistakes, and playing in a manner where you're able to capitalize on them is incredibly reliable. Tip number 6 is to play towards strong teammates. A huge error people make when their teammates are playing badly is try to salvage and lose the lane. Often when someone plays badly, they get tilted and start pinging and complaining, and it's human nature to try and calm them down so they don't ruin the game further. Sadly, in Wild Rift, this is incredibly hard to do and will almost always backfire. If you direct your attention helping a losing lane, it's likely that the opponent will be able to 2v1, or the enemy might get a trade, or the enemy jungler comes in and turns it into a 2v2, and you'll be at a huge disadvantage. You want to stay away from Fed members on the map until you're personally ready and strong enough to deal with them yourself. You don't want to mess with that 3-0 Camille in the laning phase, but if you instead put your focus towards the opposite side of the map, you can make her irrelevant by avoiding her altogether. If nobody is doing well, then you can go ahead and focus on farming up and punishing enemy mistakes. Tip number 7 is to play for shutdown gold. In Wild Rift, the amount of gold that you gain from killing an enemy champion is influenced by the amount of recent kills that they got without dying. You want to take advantage of this by focusing your attention on shutting down Fed members of the enemy team whenever you have the opportunity. Sometimes it's worth sacrificing 1 or even 2 kills or a tower in order to get that side lane with multiple teammates to kill that Fed Fiora once, and get that huge gold bounty onto one of your carries. You always want to be careful with this, as these players will be very strong and can sometimes win outnumbered fights, but when done correctly, this is a really solid way to come back from a disadvantage. Make sure to ping your team to help you out with this, as it's not something that you can always do on your own. When playing with bad teammates, you have to take every opportunity that you can get, and maybe use them as bait, but you didn't hear that from me, to make sure that that Fed enemy that's overextended dies. Once someone starts playing badly, it's very unlikely that they'll turn their performance around, so you have to be willing to take the game into your own hands. Tip number 8 is to pick champions that have agency. It's important to make sure that you can pick champions that can actively influence the outcome of the game. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean 1v9 carrying by killing all 5 opponents yourself, but it does mean picking champions that can impact the map at all stages of the game. Using support as an example, a great champion to play is Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank doesn't need his team to be ahead in order to do things that he wants to do. He simply wants to make picks by landing hooks. If your team is behind and your teammates are playing poorly, all it can take is one accurate hook onto the enemy carry to get you back into the game. Compare that to someone playing someone like Sona or Janna. These champions thrive on building up the teammates that are already competent and ahead, and otherwise resort to playing defensively. Nobody expects you to smurf on every game you play, but it's important not to gimp yourself in a champion select by picking a champion that will be sitting there while your team loses you the game. Carrying on from the champion selection, tip number 9 is to pick champions that you know how to play. In our experience, it's incredibly important to have mastery of your chosen champion, especially when it comes to crunch time and you have to carry 4 bad teammates. If your teammates are playing poorly, it's even more important than normal to be able to take control of the game yourself. And if you're too busy worrying about the specifics of your champion kit and learning abilities, that's going to be a little bit too difficult. There's nothing wrong with having 1 or 2 main champions and then occasionally playing with others, especially in ranked. You want to be so comfortable on your champion that you don't have to even think about the mechanics of them, and you can just focus on the macro play. You can't afford to be distracted. Carrying a game when you're at a disadvantage is hard enough as it is, so set yourself up for success by playing one of your best champions. Tip number 10 is to subscribe to ProGuides and watch more specific educational content on how to improve. I'm not even kidding when I say that, and I'm not even being biased. I think we have a lot of great coaches with a lot of great experiences that write these scripts, so you can trust them. Sometimes in your games, you'll feel like your team is doing poorly. And as discussed in this video, there are specific strategies that you can use to win. But the best thing that you can actually do is to focus on improving, and remember that results will come in time. Remember, nobody can win every game. My personal tip for you is not to be so hard on yourself. I know when I'm doing poorly, it really gets to my head, but give yourself some grace and know that not every game is in your hands. Even when you're playing extremely well, there's still countless things that you can do to be improving on. Bad games where you die 5 times in lane can often be attributed to the mechanical errors in the early game or the lack of matchup knowledge, which will come with time. Focusing on the games where you are ahead and strong and have influence of the game but still don't win is more important. Thinking about the decisions you make to take control over the Rift and making sure they're as efficient as they can be is the best way to win more games and carry your bad teammates.
That's it for our 10 tips for carrying bad players. Remember, you're only one of the 10 players inside the game, so don't worry if you can't carry it. Keep up the good performance and you'll be climbing in no time. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and make sure you answer our question of the day in the comments down below. Go look on the Rift and make sure you subscribe and join the Discord. With all that being said, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.